everybody for joining us. We're going to get started in just a second. Thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that minute of elevator music. My name's Sammy Focarino. I'm going to be the moderator for today's session, and thanks for joining us. This webinar is presented by Consensus. Consensus is leading the world into the new era of demo automation. Our platform gets your buyers what they need when they need it. It then multiplies your revenue team's impacts and unique insights on those buyers. As a result, you'll see faster close times, larger deals, and higher close rates. You can learn more at goconsensus.com. We are very excited to be less than a month away from the biggest event in pre-sales, DemoFest 2024. This event is virtual, accessible to you from anywhere in the world. It's going to feature over 50 speakers and over 40 sessions, with a special day on the 23rd for Consensus customers. Ron had the highest rated session and highest rated speaker score at last year's event, and he's also going to be presenting this year, so it's definitely a session you will not want to miss. I'll post the link to register in the chat here, and we hope to see you guys all there. We encourage you to participate in today's webinar. Our speaker will answer any questions at the close of the event, but you're welcome to post your questions at any time through the Q&A box on the right side of your console. If at any time you're having technical difficulties, press the help button on the right side of your screen. And now I'm going to introduce our speakers. Ron Whitson is the Vice President of Global Presales Services, and we have John, Senior Platform Architect, Carl, Platform Architect, and Joe, Manager of Architecture and Integrations, from his team with us here today. And with that, I'm going to turn the rest of the time over to you, Joe.
Well, thank you so much, Sammy, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're attending. We're happy to have you here with us. We appreciate the opportunity from Consensus to deliver this webinar today and just kind of take a minute and set up what we're talking about here. At Seismic, where we all work, we have a team that we refer to as GPS, Global Pre-Sales Services. And our primary mission is to help all the other sales engineers in the field in lots of different ways. The portion of the team that's joining us today is what we call our platform architects. And their job, as you're going to learn, is to really help up-level the technical capabilities of the other SEs in the field and help them when it gets to some of the deeper dive InfoSec stuff, integrations, IT, security, all that good stuff. So we thought it would be helpful to share a little time today. This was actually an idea that Carl had. He wanted to meet other platform architects and be able to connect and network. So obviously feel free to reach out and connect with us over LinkedIn. We are pretty much friendly humans, and we like having conversations. So with that, let me get the guys to introduce themselves a little bit, and we'll start with Joe.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ron. And I'd echo thanks, Sammy, and the Consensus team for having us on board today. So a little bit about myself. As mentioned, I'm a platform architect here at Seismic. Been with the company for about 8 years in a few different roles. So started my tenure here on our professional services team as an implementation engineer, which is, think of that as an associate level solution architect. So implementing our customers' projects, doing a lot of data work, doing a lot of integration focused work, and then graduated into a pre-sales role about 3 years ago and have frankly loved it ever since. I'll pass it off to John and then ultimately to Carl.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, hi, I'm John Hunt, and I'm also a platform architect here with Seismic. based out of the UK, and I cover the EMEA region. So it's a pretty nice role because we've got all of Europe as well as Australia as well. My journey here is like slightly different sometimes to other people's, because I started out in sales around 15 years ago, sales AE, and then sort of progressed into technical support roles, technical specialist roles, integration managers, and both pre-sales and post-sales solution architecture before joining Seismic about a year ago as a platform architect, and it's been absolutely brilliant. So yeah, it's a little bit about me. Carl, I'll pass it to you.
Awesome. Similar to Joe, I started with Seismic about 4 years ago within our services team as an implementation engineer, which really kind of is a good spot to start, I think, for a platform architect to understand how do we implement all of our integrations, all of the more technical aspects of the product. And then about 2 years ago, decided to make the move to pre-sales, understand what happens pre-sales, be a little bit more agile on this side of the business here, and been an architect now for about 2 years.
That's great. Thank you guys for sharing a little bit about your journey to get here. Let's dive into what does it look like, the role of the platform architect on a day-to-day basis. And again, Joe, I'll just start with you. Kind of tell us a little bit about what are some of the things you're doing? How are you helping Seismic?
Yeah, happy to. So the primary role here at Seismic of a platform architect is to support our field sales engineers. Typically, what that looks like is deeper technical conversations with our prospects. For example, we'll typically meet with a security officer or a compliance officer or otherwise technology teams within our customers and prospects organizations to get their questions answered, make sure that they feel comfortable with our cloud deployment models. And a big part of that is also use case design and solutions. So if there is an integration in scope for a particular customer, we would help map out what that integration would look like and dive into some of the details about exactly how it would work. I don't want to steal, I guess, John and Carl's thunder here. I could go on quite a bit more about what the role entails. I think it's important to note as we get into it, the different business units within our company that we touch. So we liaise with a lot of different teams. We'll talk about that more in a little bit, but again, I'll pass it to John if you want to expand.
Yeah, I mean, you've covered like quite a lot of it. I think one of the other thing I'd probably like sort of highlight a little bit is around the way in which sometimes we help customers in that sort of custom implementation, custom architecture piece. So we're working with the customers and their IT teams or their developers and looking at things like third-party APIs or other systems which we want to bring data into Seismic, or something's coming out of Seismic, and those kind of things. So that's a really important part of the job in my mind as well, is just having that skill or that ability to work with those developers, those IT people, but also the ability to pick up like a third-party API, read through it, and understand how we can make use of that with the technology that we have at our disposal. Yeah, so that's all I would add to it. Carl, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to
that. I like to say that one of the main mantras that we hear is everybody's used to hearing, "Do you integrate with X, Y?" I like to say it's kind of our job to know who we integrate with, and if we don't, figure out how we can. So that's always a fun keyword on our side.
So that's a really good point, Carl. And think about those integrations. What are some of the primary tools? What are some of the primary skills that you bring to the table that help you understand and answer that question and solve some of those integration things that pop up during the sales cycle?
Yeah, I'm happy to start with this one. So I think one of the big things that we see a push to is data transfer, right? So, everybody now has a developer portal or a set of APIs to utilize, which really opens the door to be able to integrate with many different systems. I think one of the skills that we have to have is understanding how do we design and implement an integration and an implementation in a way that's scalable as well as lightweight and agile as it can be. So I think one portion of the skills is understanding the technical aspects of authentication, APIs, different data transfer models. And then the other portion is really understanding the design and what makes a good integration.
Yeah, John, do you have anything to kind of layer onto that
Yeah.
as far as some of the tools and skills necessary for the role?
I would sort of echo or carry on from what Carl said, because I think it's like you can a lot of the times you'll understand what's possible to be done, like what can be done, but it's also going back to what Carl said around the design principles behind that to understand which is the best approach to take to make that an effective integration, because there's some, and I think that comes from experience, that comes from having rebuilt similar things elsewhere, and then those kind of things. They're really key important pieces, because what you're trying to deliver is the best possible user experience and the best possible way of integrating those two platforms in a scalable fashion, all those kind of things that go with it. It's really important that we're able to deliver that, and also, like, convince, relay that information back to the customer and give them confidence that that can be done that way. So.
Yeah. And John, I'm glad you landed on that at the end, because I think a very important part of this is, yes, we're talking about technical topics or details, but we ultimately need to translate that into the buyer or the customer's experience. So putting it into business terms, what a technical integration is doing is a very important part of the role, and effectively communicating that to our clients.
Yeah, good stuff. Listen, I just want to invite everyone to throw some questions in the Q&A. We'll tackle those kind of as we wrap up. But feel free to chat in there as well. We'll try to keep an eyeball on that and see if there's anything we should reply to. As we kind of talked about this, and both you guys kind of brought it, or all of you guys brought it up actually. I know one of the things that you're really proud of are some of the services SKUs. Products that have actually been created that we actually sell. So I want to talk about a couple of things, right? Talk a little bit about the services queues, how those came about and what benefit that drives for Seismic. But then the other thing too is keep in mind, this is on the pre-sales side of the equation. So we're still in the art of the possible. We're still convincing our buyers that this is the proper solution. John, I know you've got some of the experience that you bring from the sales side. Carl, you and Joe come from the services side, so we got a little bit of a blending of our thinking there. So I'd be interested to get everyone's thoughts on that piece of it as well. Joe, kick us off on this one if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course, happy to. And I mentioned at the beginning that we liaise with a lot of different teams within the organization, and so Ron, I think this is a perfect example. So the way we view building integrations or building solutions for our clients, we see ourselves as kind of the tip of the spear. So we're the bleeding edge. We're working with net new prospects. We're working with customers who want to expand their use of our tool. And so with that in mind, we need to think in a nimble way. We need to build in a nimble way and be able to understand what's effective, what resonates with our buyers, and how can we turn that into something production scale. So we're often ideating on what's the next integration we should build and why, what's the impact it will have for our customers. And ultimately, if we find that it sticks and that it's valuable for more than one customer, we have the opportunity to work with our professional services counterparts. Shout out to that team. They're incredible. And ultimately, what we are able to build together is services, SKUs, or integrations that can be packaged up and offered up on our marketplace, which is what we refer to as the Seismic Exchange. And so, that's finding and building more value on top of a platform that offers a lot of different capabilities. So I hope that's enough to get us started. I'll pass it to Carl if you want to expand.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we are able to provide being on the pre-sales is we have a lot of input from our buyers and people that we're talking to in the field about what are they looking for in a product, what are they looking for in an integration. So that allows us to be able to kind of take a more proactive role as opposed to reactive in building out integrations that we've started to hear rumblings about that multiple people are looking at. And is in our role as platform architects, we heavily use no code, low code type tools to be able to kind of build out different POCs and then be able to talk with those counterparts and services to understand, are you all hearing, you know, the same type of requests from the post sales side? And that allows us to really be able to be, as Joe mentioned, nimble in our approach, as well as be able to build out these different POCs and kind of get feedback and see if this type of integration makes sense for a packaged SKU.
Yeah, I feel like it puts us in a unique position because we're getting that feedback from customers. We're working with them daily, day in, day out, and it gives us that ability to have our team or our area is almost like an incubation or a nursery that can build out these like one-off custom integrations, but we build them in such a scalable way that we, you know, if they become popular or there's a need for them in the marketplace, or we're seeing the same requests coming from other customers, which happens frequently, we've got that like to Carl's point, the ability to build those POCs and to deliver those integrations, but also that's our counterpart team, we can push that out into the marketplace through them as a packaged integration, which is where I think a lot of some of our packaged integrations originally came from. They came from one customer needing one kind of type of you know, integration to solve a particular set of problems that actually was replicated throughout the marketplace. And we've realized that actually other customers want this, and we can package it in such a way that we can actually go to the market with it, which is great because you get, you know, but originally these come from that feedback we had with the customers, I think. So it puts us in a unique position, I think.
I think it's fantastic. We've seen real success with our customers and prospects in having these things packaged up and ready to go, and it's really driven a benefit to the company. And Charles Lee has a couple of questions in there. One of them is metrics, and Charles, we'll get to more of that later on. But I think it's really important. You guys have actually set it up so that there is some incentive for the platform architect team to get paid when these services SKUs are sold. So I mean, it's benefiting everyone. So I think it's a fantastic model. I want to go into just kind of the second piece of that question, which is this idea of services and pre-sales. I've been doing this shop for a while, and everywhere I've been, that's been kind of the sticky wicket. That's where things tend to break down as we finish up the sales cycle and try to hand over information to the services team so they're able to actually implement. Sales engineering, pre-sales is all about the art of the possible. But then when it comes to implementation time, we've really got to make that stuff work. So I think that partnership between you guys and the services team is crucial to make sure that it's real stuff that's going to work. But this is the first part I want to direct to you, Joe and Carl, is coming from that services world. What were some of the things you had to change about how you thought? What were some of the differences you saw in the job now in a pre-sales facing role versus the services role?
Yeah, Ron, I would echo. We really need to embrace the art of the possible, and that comes with a little bit of learning, because when you're on professional services, it's very much, this is what we're building, this is what we're able to build with the tools we have, and so the design is structured as such. And you know, we have a little bit more flexibility in the pre-sales side, and I think it's important to note that, you know, we're not doing this in a silo. We work very closely with our product team and with our services team. So as we're building an integration, we might call out something that we see as a gap. Maybe we need an endpoint to return certain data sets that it's not currently returning. And so we communicate that clearly and across the board, both to our product team and to our professional services team. And, you know, we need to get in front of any of those items so that when it does come time for implementation, that we have all of our ducks in a row and are prepared to deliver a quality product. Carl, I'm sure you have more to add on that one.
Yeah, I really like the emphasis, Joe, that you've put on this role within our company. We sit on the sales engineering, the pre-sales team, but it's one of the more collaborative roles, I would say, in the company between us, our services, and our product teams, making sure that we're all aligned. And Joe, to your point, I think one of the big differences that I had to learn in moving from the services to the pre-sales side is on services. It's very kind of straight line. Yes, no, we can, we can't. And now it's understanding a little bit more on the reason for the ask for a certain integration, right? Oftentimes we get asked and we say, do you integrate with XYZ in this particular way? And asking the why and understanding why we need to integrate, or the business case, can oftentimes help us to be a little bit more flexible and not just become a yes, no, we can, we can't integrate, but more of a trusted advisor within the pre-sales journey to be able to help guide them to the best workflows that they can have.
I think you're on mute, Ron.
Because the dog is so excited about the services queues, I had to mute myself. John, I'll come to you in just a minute, but Joe and Carl, if we have people coming from the services world into the pre-sales world, what's like your single best little tidbit of advice for them that would help them be successful?
Effective communication, in my mind. Clearly communicating not only internally, but to your prospects and to your customers. It can't be understated or overstated enough. And we talked about technical and business language a little bit earlier in the meeting. That's an important element of this. It's not just effectively communicating what an API does. It's translating that into business requirements and business solutions. Speak your customer's language, essentially. So that would be my biggest item.
Carl?
I think it's a similar vein. My two would be, one is ask more questions than you think you should. Understand the why. I think discovery is huge, especially in a role where we're looking to build integrations and looking to solution. And then the second portion there would be know your audience. Is we've mentioned, we'll talk from CIOs to super technical people, as well as your marketing and your more business focused people. So knowing your audience when you're going in, and when you should go deep on a topic, and when you need to be able to, as Joe mentioned, speak their language.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I've over my career, I've taken a lot of services people and pulled them into pre-sales, and they've turned out to be excellent pre-sales people because they know the product really, really well. The one thing I see as a general trend for those individuals is pulling them a little bit higher up from the weeds of the product, and being able to tell that higher level story. That's what I've seen over time. But John, you've kind of got the opposite experience. You were living in that sales world as an AE, and we still like you anyway. But you've come over to pre-sales now. What were some of the things that you've had to learn to, as you get into actually building solutions that people are going to use on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I think it's part of it is still the effective communication, right? You still have to be able to describing layman's terms to your different audiences, your idea or your concept or whatever it is that you're positioning, for that integration. The other part is, obviously, you need to do your due diligence. You need to understand what is technically possible from the services side. And I think really it's almost the flipping it around a little bit of, you can't say something that can't be done, right? So you need to know what can be done, what is feasible on our side, but bring that across into that sort of customer communication piece. So a lot of the times, especially when you join a new company anyway, there's that sort of very steep learning curve where you've got to work with services, pro-serve. You've got to have that relationship with them and also pull them in on certain things before you go and sit in front of a customer to make sure what you're saying can actually be done in the way that you think it can be done. Over time, that gets easier because you build up that knowledge base. But I think you approach it from the other side, really. You have to I'm very lucky. I have Joe and Carl who come from the services side, so they're my resource for those missing gaps that I had when I first started. That's my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, no, that's great. Just as a little bit of information here, we've got a couple of questions about how the team is structured and how the SEs in the field request our assistance. So let's just take a minute or two and talk about that. And then I've got a question that I'd like to ask each of you. Also want you to be thinking about. I'm going to ask you about an example of where you've worked with someone on the field on a specific issue and how you provide assistance, how that went. But just as overall information, so again, it's a team called GPS. We help out with a lot of different areas. Platform architecture is one. We have a team that manages the demo environments. We've got SEs who support the partner organization, and we've got platform specialists. So these are people who have deep knowledge in some of the different platforms we've acquired over time as we've grown the platform. In just about every one of those situations, SEs in the field submit what we refer to as a team member request. And those come in based on the type of request. Maybe they're requesting an architect, or maybe they're requesting some assistance with a demo tenant. And we process that ticket just like anybody else would. And someone gets assigned and they go off to help them. David Chalk had a question for us about how the team is structured. And right now, it's still a fairly small team. I mean, you're looking at them for the platform architects. And right now, we're kind of, I would say, divisionally separated. I mean, John basically gets anything that's not in the US, and Joe and Carl split up the US opportunities based on market. So we do plan on growing the team over time. And the results that we've seen with the field that we'll talk about in a little bit have been fantastic. Here at Seismic, when we close new business, we send out what we call a push pin across the company. It recognizes people who have contributed, talks about the journey of the buyer. And this team, these guys you're seeing in front of you today, get called out on just about every push pin, especially the big ones. So it's a lot of fun to sit back and watch those come through. But thinking about helping those SEs in the field, I want you to each think to a recent example, and Joe, I'll start with you again, but tell us about what the example was, how you got involved, talk a little bit about working with them and the discovery aspect of it, and what was the result?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just I'll bring it back to the last comment that you had about requesting our support, Ron, because in the question feed here, I see Charles asked about qualifying those requests. I think that's an important piece to touch on as well. We are 3 individuals who serve approximately 60 field sales engineers, I think. That sound right, Ron?
Yep.
So that ratio is considerable. So with that in mind, we need to make sure that we're qualifying these requests and that it's valuable work for us. One way that we manage that is through enablement for our field SEs, meaning if we build a particular integration and we need the word to be put out among our field, how that integration works, typical questions that are asked, those types of things. We build a lot of content internally to support our field, meaning they can self-serve with that content and they can go off and have that conversation. That enables us to open new doors to new integration opportunities and new use cases. So with that, Ron, I'll cite one example. This was in the financial services industry. I'm working with one of our principal sales engineers. This is a financial institution who wanted to use Salesforce and Seismic in a unique way. So they wanted to automatically filter materials that are exposed, Seismic materials that are exposed inside of CRM. And they wanted to do it in a unique way to manage what products could be sent out to their prospects, to their customers. So in the financial services world, they have firm restrictions, i.e. what products can be sold in a particular state or in a particular country. And so we use some of the platform extensibility tools to solve their problem in a unique way. Ultimately, it serves up search results upon the user landing in a particular page within CRM. The ease of use is really the value driver there. So the customers and users didn't want to go through several clicks, several filters. There's data points in CRM and there's content that exists in the Seismic platform. So we automatically married those inside of the user interface. And that was a custom solution that really just, it wasn't a heavy lift by any means. It was just using our tools in a unique way to find that solution.
Nice. John, do you have an example of
I do,
something
yeah,
similar?
yeah, and again, it's from the financial services sector, and this example sort of helps to illustrate, I think, where a lot of the value our team brings on a fairly regular basis. This was a prospector who's now a client, and they had a fairly complex need to build fairly complex documents inside Seismic that linked back to, or that were driven by a data source of asset portfolios and things like that, which was fairly complex. And basically, the SE and the team had built out what these finished documents would look like in Seismic, and they'd gone back to the customer, to show them that it can be done, and this is what it looks like. And to illustrate the point of like where we come in and where we add value, the client was basically like, okay, yeah, this is great. We know that you can build this stuff, but our IT team wants to know how is this coming from this data repository? How are you, when you call these APIs, how are you then using that data, and how are you applying that business logic to this particular document? And then effectively, it was a call with their IT and the developers, who really weren't going to sign off on this until they could really fully understand what was happening here, because Seismic's a fairly open platform, and you can manipulate the back end in that respect. So what I did is I went in and basically walked them through and showed them, here's the data layer, here's the business logic layer, and here's the presentation layer, which you've already seen. And here is how we're integrating with that system. Here's the API calls we make, but not just to bring this data back. This is the logic we've written on top to be able to derive this table, which sits here, those kind of things. And it really was a very last minute call. It was like, it was a half an hour call, and it was at the same week. They were all due to things, the ink was meant to go on the paper and all the rest of it. And I think like being able to do that, being able to sort of like relay that information in understandable terms to that audience, what we're doing, both from a high level and actually clicking around and showing them as well, was really valuable. And I think that helps illustrate sort of the sort of calls and things that we do on a day-to-day basis. So that's my example anyway.
John, I think that's really good. I want you to say that once again, the 3 different layers, because I mean, if people have been, in this kind of role before, they may get that model. But if you're new to it, I think it's really, really powerful. So could you just talk about those layers once again?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, exactly. I mean, for this particular audience, there were IT and developers, right? But they weren't necessarily that familiar with our platform, right? Because they weren't ultimately the end users. They just needed to know what was happening for this. So in terms of the data layer in Seismic, it's effectively a place in which we can connect to data sources, right? So we can ingest data as flat files, or we can call an API and bring parts of that data back. But we can store that data in our own tabular format, which then allows us to effectively write SQL or use scripting or whatever it is on top to manipulate that before we present it in a finished final document, which is what the seller sees, right? Or what the end user sees. But it's really important to talk the IT and the developers through that process of what was happening, but not just using the big words or whatever, but actually showing them this is how we've connected to the API, and this is what you can see it coming in. You can see the script we've written. And I did all this. I sort of set it up as a POC so that they could see it all, to see what was going on. So they had that reassurance that, that understanding of what's happening under the hood, I suppose, is the way to sum it up. And I feel it was valuable for them. And they are now a client. So hopefully
it must have worked.
It worked, right? Yeah.
But just a smart approach to it from a business standpoint, right? Not necessarily a tech standpoint, but
right.
Here's the data layer, stuff is happening. Here's the business layer, rules are happening. Here's the presentation layer, how you interact with it. A very clear model. These
weren't things that we necessarily outline in our product in that way. They were things that I outlined for the audience for this presentation. So you're absolutely right. And it goes back to that, breaking it down into understandable layman's terms, or language which is appropriate for your audience to, to communicate these things, sometimes fairly technical things, but in a way that is understandable for people. And that's a really important part of our role, I think.
Very good. Very good. Carl, any examples you want to share on this topic?
Yeah, happy to. I think we can see a theme with financial services. So I'm gonna try to switch to more of our core segment that we look at. But this particular example was from an automation consulting firm that we were working with, and as such, one of their big concerns is user management, right? So they have a number of internal users, but they have a vast partner network, and so one thing that we get into when we start looking at bringing different partner users and so forth on is, how do we manage that in a scalable way, whether that be initial onboarding of these partners, how do we get them access to the platform? But then once they do have access, how do we make sure that we're managing them, that they're only provisioned for the correct content, they can only send out the correct content, and only be able to see areas of the platform that they should. And so this turned into a little bit more of a fun business case, understanding how today does this firm manage their partners? Do they have a centralized partner management system? And then from there, understanding what touch points do we have to be able to automate this so that there's not one admin going in and having to manage each individual partner, adding partners, removing partners as they come and go. So it turns into a nice process of being able to build out a data flow diagram, understand where everybody comes from. And then a lot of the times it turns into, and in this case as well, understanding what's that MVP, right? Do we have a subset of our partner firms that take up 95% of all of our partners, and let's make sure that that's our central focus? Because one thing that we can often see when we get into these custom integrations is there can always be a question of, well, what if this one unique case happens? And so part of our job is understanding when those happen, what's kind of the reason behind it, and is there a way, as opposed to building in super complex logic into our data flows, understanding, is there a better way that we can manage that upstream? So being able to help the customer realize not just here's how we can integrate, but here's a different way that you can look at managing your partners on your side, so that not just for Seismic that flows nicely, but this will be able to help all of your downstream systems in the future as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like a little bit of maybe business process consultation and work happening alongside the actual development of the solution.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, you know what? Would it even be a webinar in 2024 if we didn't say AI? So there, I said that we can move on. No, actually, I mean, that's obviously a big topic. I want to see, what do you guys see as some of the technical trends that are driving some of the conversations you're having recently? Is it around AI? Is it around something else? And Joe, come to you again first on this one.
There you are,
mute.
Yeah, Ron, AI, obviously very hot topic right now, and also a very broad topic. And so I'll hone in a little bit on generative AI, because I think that's, from my experience, been a focus among our customers, among our prospects, frankly, among our product development org as well. So we're definitely exploring a lot of different opportunities within our platform to leverage generative AI. With that in mind, you know, there's a spectrum. There's clients that are very forward-looking and excited about it. On the other end of the spectrum, a lot of hesitation, concern, if you will, don't want to touch it. All of the capabilities that we roll out within our platform are essentially feature gated, so you can turn on the AI features or not. With that in mind, you know, we're looking at the integration landscape and how it's changing. I'll call out one example. You know, search and discover has really taken hold lately. Every customer wants to be able to find the data, the content, whatever learning materials they need, essentially in a moment's notice. So luckily we have a powerful search tool internally. We integrate with a number of vendors who do a lot of the same thing: search, find, discover, and integrate. I'll call out specifically the Microsoft Sales Copilot integration, whereby it's helping client-facing teams throughout their entire seller lifecycle, meaning regardless of the application I'm living in, it's helping me draft an email, it's helping me find content that's relevant to support my sales cycle. It's tracking down answers that I need in a moment's notice, either from CRM, from Slack tools or other communication tools, you name it. And so, you know, we see that expanding, continuing to expand, and getting richer, meaning the quality of the responses that generative AI provides is getting better, I think, by the day, it feels like. So we're leaning in, we're excited about it. I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about on AI. So I'll pass it to John, and see if you have more to add.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think like there's certain parts of like generative AI which are going to become table stakes. There's parts where like the recommendation text for an email, or you're building something. These are starter pieces. Down the line, or in the not too distant future, I think they're going to find them all over the place. They're going to be in everything. And so, there's that. But I think where the real future of AI lies is in the data and insights piece. Going back to what Joe said around something like our Microsoft Copilot integration, our partnership with Microsoft, where that's where the real power of things are, is where you can use that business logic to bring in content in the right places and those sort of things. It's not just like, starting, I've got no, how do I respond to an email? Oh, here's some text. That's where it's going to be, where we're seeing it, or where I think it's going to grow, is in that area there. I think you're going to see more of those kind of like things like Microsoft Copilot integration with content-based platforms like ourselves, using that sort of AI logic. I think it's an exciting place to be, actually. Carl.
Awesome. I think this is a trend that's all following the same path. And we saw it when search engines first started, right?
Yeah.
The ability to have information right at your fingertips without having to run to a book and research it. And now we're at the point where, with AI, we're able to ask questions directly within systems and get responses from, all the data that's within the system. And so I think, we'll see a big trend towards the idea of just-in-time data, right? So being able to get back the data you want when you want it in the format you want it from a simple question. I think another area that John touched on that I think is going to be a big part is the data in the back end, right? So I think one area we'll be able to start seeing a lot of is as pre-sales and in the sales side of things and just being an enablement software, there's a big focus on how do we impact time to close, how do we impact touch points within the customer interactions, but then how do we as admins or enablement people make sense of that? And I think AI, we're going to see a big push there, just for data visualization type BI, right? Being able to make sense out of all this data that we're gathering in easy consumable ways without having to be honest, a bunch of open recs dedicated directly to just building out some of these understandings and way to understand the data in the back end.
No, good stuff, guys. I mean, I use AI quite a bit. It's a really good assistant. It's funny how everybody's kind of adopted this Copilot language. And I think we're going to have some work to do to really help educate people as to what we're talking about as we use different product names across not only Seismic, but other companies as well. So I think that's a real opportunity going forward. We're starting to wind up a little bit. We've got about 18 minutes left total, and we're going to have some time at the end for some Q&A. So again, if you've got some questions out there for us, pop them into Q&A. We'll be addressing those very shortly. But I want to kind of give each of you guys an opportunity to share a topic that you would like to share with the group, or just kind of have a discussion around. I know we had talked about a lot of things today, but is there anything you want to circle back to, or are there any new topics you feel like are important to share with the group today? And just to be different, John, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. There is something, I think like one of the things I wanted to bring or highlight again is where our role sits in that relationship to the SCs, and also the way in which we work with the SCs, but also through, Joe mentioned it earlier, through enablement and through that place where part of our role is to upskill our SCs, right? Part of what we're trying to do here, along with just building out integrations and showing the SCs, oh, this is the integration, so now you can go and talk about it. That's one side of things. But there's also this trajectory where if we can enable or up-level our SCs, that actually has the positive effect of upskilling ourselves. Because what it does, it allows us freer time to be able to go away and do other things that we might not have time to do if we're maintaining the status quo, so to speak. So I think like it's really one of the things I think the team has looked at this year is the way in which we can have a real impact on our global SE team overall, so that we can bring them up to a higher level and give them a trajectory path as well along the way if they want to do that. But also allow us more freedom to be able to focus on some of the things that we want to be able to do, like building out like those POCs that will eventually become SKUs and those sort of things. So I just wanted to just circle back on that a little bit. I don't know if anyone's got anything else to add to that, but personally, it's an important thing. And it's something I've seen before in other companies. And I think it's a real good initiative that we have as a team for the coming year.
Yeah, just as a follow-up on that, John, what are some of the things that you guys are doing to help up-level the SEs in the field? And how do you know if it's working or not?
Yeah, good point. So enablement takes many forms and it's never a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. It's like having a kid. Once you've got a kid, they're there forever. So like, so we obviously have a plan to do enablement around certain subjects. Those kind of things work, and we have to revisit those things from time to time. The other thing we've done, and this is Joe's initiative here, I can't take credit for this, but we have like what we call office hours now, whereby as a platform architect, we will open ourselves up once a week or once every couple of weeks, and there's an hour block, and people can drop in and drop out virtually, whatever it is. And it's just for the SEs, and they come in and they come to us basically with their questions, with what their challenges for the week or the challenges for their previous week, whatever it might be. We take that feedback and we look at that as a place. Okay, these are the questions they're asking. This is the insight we're getting back from that side of the field, right? So we kind of can build that into enablement. We can get a greater understanding from product side to help them as well. So we can be like a conduit between the two, and really just like, obviously building those relationships and having that relationship with the team is really important as well. So those are the kind of things we're doing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think the office hours is a brilliant opportunity to do exactly that. And again, it was a great idea that Joe had. It's been implemented really well. I'm hearing great feedback from everyone on their chance to come in and ask those questions and get some attention. So I think it's working out really, really well. Joe, I'm gonna save you for last on this one. So Carl, was there any particular topic that you wanted to revisit or share?
Yeah. I think one of the things that comes to mind is kind of, why does this role exist? So in my opinion, I think this is a role that's newer to the industry, but I think we're going to see a big surge in the next couple of years. And for me, there's kind of a threefold answer here. One is exactly what John said, right? We serve the field SEs. So at its core, our job is to be able to come into deals, to be able to help the SE, as well as help get that deal over the line. And a lot of times that's by providing a level of confidence, and being, again, one of those, a trusted advisor in a deal. So bringing another voice, we're able to go much deeper in the technical when IT teams or security teams have concerns. And I think one of the flip sides of that is we've put a big emphasis on collaboration, and in my mind, one of the things we're able to do is, one, act as a level of protection for our product and engineering teams, right? We often hear our product and engineering teams, the little back and forth with our sales teams being able to say, hey, we need X, Y, and Z by this time. We're able to provide that kind of tier one support for our product teams to be able to field some of those questions. But on the flip side of that, we get to back to the question and the topic of qualification. We're able to advocate to our SEs and have a bigger voice within our product team to be able to qualify some of these asks that we see often in the field, and bring more attention to them to our product teams on behalf of our SE teams. And then, I think one of the other areas that we've seen as far as why this role exists is, in the early 2000s, right, everybody was on-prem solutions and so forth, and there was a role for hyper, technical people to be able to come in, implement, and kind of customize these on-prem softwares to the exact business needs. As SaaS first kind of started up, we moved away from that hyper customization, and we were able to deploy software faster. We were able to make it much cheaper. And so with that came a lot less customization, right? Here's the product, here's how you use it. This is what happens. And now we're seeing it kind of come back full circle where everything is getting hyper customized, right? It's here's the product, here's what we offer, but here's the different integrations, or we want our workflows and our software to live within the workflow and the systems that you're already using today. So being able to, again, get to that level of customization to not necessarily change the business process that is at the company, but being able to complement it and meet the sellers, the enablers, the end users where they are today. So as we see that shift back to hyper customization, I think we're definitely seeing another focus on roles that are more technical and able to help customize.
Yes, it's so good, Carl. You whippersnappers say you don't know how good you got it. I used to have to know which server somebody's going to have to buy, what was the RAM, what was the memory, all this stuff, right? As part of a deal, you had to know that stuff. So it was kind of nuts. And now you don't have to worry about it as much, but it's what a benefit to the SEs in the field here at Seismic that we have a team that helps support them. I mean, I never had that in my career. It was always, if you needed something, you had to do it yourself. So it's a huge benefit. I guess the other thing I would add too is obviously as your platform becomes more complex, this is a role that's typically more needed. If you're a very straightforward product and there's not a lot of integrations, there may be not as much need for the role of a platform architect. So obviously you gotta kind of put that into the mix. But Joe, bring us home. What would you like to share with the folks here today?
Yeah, I think you started to hit on it right there, Ron. A lot of companies in the SaaS industry today, so some of you might be asking, well, what is the difference between what you do and what a sales engineer can do? And we certainly overlap and we support our sales engineers, but I wouldn't consider a platform architect a needed role in a company that is selling a point solution or a point product. And as we've grown, probably over the last 10 years, we've gone from solving 2 or 3 core use cases to upwards of 20 core use cases. And so with that, the breadth of the platform has expanded dramatically. So it's, the breadth and the depth that you ultimately need to have, the knowledge of all of the different functionalities and modals within our platform. That's a lot to take on to get to the depth that you need in order to build an integration. And so with that, it's in our title, the platform, right? I wouldn't see this role existing in a smaller sort of point solution. So that's I guess the point that I would drive home.
No, thanks for that. I think that's it, right? I mean, again, as you get complexity, then you may need some help to make the job and the job for the SEs in the field a little bit easier, take a little bit off their plate. I mean, the whole mission for GPS is to take away some of these tasks, these day-to-day tasks, and some of these deeper tasks, so our SEs in the field can focus on having those conversations with the customers and developing those relationships and really understanding their business needs. But no, guys, thanks so much. I appreciate the conversation. The time has flown. We've got about 7 minutes left total. Let's invite Sammy to come back on and she can jump into the Q&A and throw some questions to us. And whoever is ready can be happy to answer it.
All right, let's see. So we have a couple questions that have come through. How do the field architects request help from the platform architects? How are the requests qualified? And how do you balance volume, regions, and other factors?
Yeah, so just to kind of summarize, Ron mentioned this, team member request is the process that we use that exists within our CRM system. So if a sales engineer is assigned to an opportunity and they would like our support, they would open up a team member request against that opportunity. We get a workflow notification and we decide among the 3 of us who will help support that. Typically, it's region-based or market-based. What's the second part of that question? Volume. Yeah, we manage volume within the 3 of us. Sometimes it gets tight, particularly around quarter end, which we're in the midst of here. But a big part of that is qualification as well. And we talked about enabling the field quite a bit today. If it's something that we foresee a lot of our SEs asking for, we build the content to support them so that they can self-serve, get the answers themselves, and all of a sudden that opens up our time for other activities and other initiatives.
Awesome. Can you talk about the sales to pre-sales relationships, ratios, discovery, demo, etc., how they work together and how they work separately?
I don't want to take all the answers, guys. Do you want that?
Yeah, I'll hop in. So the sales pre-sales relationships, I think Joe touched on this as far as ratios. As far as there's 3 of us architects, and I believe and Ron, you'll have to correct me again, I believe about 60 field SEs.
Yep.
And as far as deals that we touch, I think Ron mentioned it earlier as well, the larger bookings, any deal that's larger in size will almost always have an architect on it, whether that's a deal that we're involved with from start to end, or whether that's more in a supporting fashion, a meeting internally with our sales and SE teams to be able to help provide guidance and kind of best practices. Ron, you'll have to help me with the exact number. I believe we touch roughly a quarter of all business that kind of comes into the company, if I'm correct.
Yep.
So from that side, I think we're touching a large amount, and we have a pretty good ratio. As far as demoing, coming from the services side, I think there's overlap within the sales engineers and ourselves. Personally, I try to stay away from demoing. Sales engineers are much better at demoing. They're much better at that. But my role is to understand the story that we're telling, and how does my job being able to come in, talk about security or integrations, how can I help wrap that together in the story? And then we obviously can demo some of the more custom integrations, and that's where we come in and demo. But I by default do not consider myself a demo engineer, as some would say, or somebody that's great at demoing.
I think it's also important just to make the distinction between, we work with the AEs and we work with the SEs, but effectively it's the SE that requests us. So, sometimes we'll have these initial conversations with the AEs, or especially if you're in the office environment or whatever it is, that, but really there's this sort of like chain of command, or whatever you want to describe it as, where we are the resource that gets pulled in with the sales engineer rather than just the SE itself. So most of the time we're working as this trio, along with, other people as well, value consultants and other specialists that come in. But it's this important trio, and I think it works really, really well that way. So I just wanted to call out that distinction. Yeah.
It looks like those last 2 questions are essentially the same, Sammy. So
Yeah.
I'll take that one just to keep everybody else out of hot water. Basically, we established targets for these guys, and Carl's mentioned a little bit about what percentage of the business we touch. And these guys are very good at jumping in and helping and providing assistance. But yeah, they basically have a target, and they are paid according to meeting that target. And just a really quick question, everyone on this call, if you're going to President's Club here next week, please raise your hand. Yeah, so there's the proof in the pudding. So
Love it. Thank you. All right. I think that was pretty much all the questions we had. Those last 2 questions, like Ron mentioned, were kind of about compensation and how they incentives work, which is awesome that you guys send platform architects to President's Club. I know not all organizations do that. I think Ron is a great resource, probably, if some of you on the call are looking for someone to reach out to try and get your leadership team to allow your team to go to President's Club. So I definitely recommend reaching out to Ron, Joe, John, and Carl on LinkedIn. If you have any other questions, I'm sure they would be happy to answer them for you. Other than that, thank you all so much for taking the time to share all of those valuable insights with our audience. Thanks to all of our audience members for joining us. We hope to see everyone at Demo Fest Virtual here in just under a month. Until then, we'll see you guys soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Sammy. Thanks, everyone.
Sammy. Bye.